The IFA Show. The stories behind the financial advice headlines with the team from IFA.
Hello and welcome to the IFA Show. I'm your host, Keith Ford, and I'm joined today by Ben Nash, who is a financial advisor and founder of Pivot Wealth. Welcome to the show, Ben.
G'day, good to be here.
It's great to have you on. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. We think probably most followed on social media financial advisor in Australia.
I think
right up at the top there. This month. All right. It might vary month to month. You know, you don't release some
competition out there.
Don't release some banger Instagram reels and stuff. Are you much on TikTok?
Yeah. In fact, I used to be a lot more on TikTok, and in fact, that's probably where I saw the most amount of growth.
Right.
As I was starting to get like a significant amount of growth in my social following. But I've noticed that in the last probably 6 months and a bit, it's probably declined a little bit just in terms of the traction that it's getting as the platform matures. So yeah, it's an interesting space.
Yeah, 'cause I will very frequently, as I'm just scrolling through Instagram, like a video of yours will just pop up and I'll be like, I know that guy. Whereas I'm not on TikTok. My wife is, and she has a very strong feeling that it has the best algorithm of any of the social media platforms. I have actually mentioned this on the podcast before, but at our Advisor Innovation Summit, a specialist in AI and things along those lines, he actually affirmed her belief on this, and he said that it was the best algorithm of any of the social media platforms. Do you try and like game algorithms when you're working on this kind of stuff? Do you try and like how do you tailor it to kind of hit that space? Yeah,
look, I don't know that you can, although maybe you just need to be way smarter than I am in order to figure it out. But I think, you know, I've been doing content on social media for like pretty heavily for about 4 years. And in that time, the algorithms changed like a number of different times. So I think I'm super interested in it. I follow a lot of people that and pages that talk about, you know, how to drive followings on socials. But I don't know, my take is that if you're doing a whole strategy to play to the algorithm, it's going to quickly shift, and then you're going to have to basically do it all again. And in my experience, what I've done and what I've seen from other people that have built really good followings online is that you add value to your audience, you know who you're talking to, you know, and you put a strategy around that, and then you consistently deliver content. Now, that being said, I do shift my approach. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of like carousel posts on Instagram and a few of the other platforms as well, because the algorithm is favoring those a bit more. I wasn't doing that so much before. So little bits, but it's not like an entire shift of the strategy. And at least I haven't figured out how to do it to actually game it through, you know, hashtags or audio or whatever those things are.
I'm sure there's a way. There has to be a way,
Probably.
But as you say, as it shifts and changes, it's going to get hard. But
yeah, and look, I think for advisors and people in any sort of service space that's trying to build a following, that you're ultimately, you know, one of the core drivers of that is that you're trying to build an audience with people that will potentially do business with you at some point in time. And so if you're constantly shifting around your strategy and doing different things to cater to different corners of the internet just so you get a good algorithm, it's unlikely that you're going to be building an audience that you're adding value to and meeting those commercial goals as well.
Right. So you might potentially increase your video views or something like that, but it may not actually end up being a positive increase. It could just be empty noise or something along those lines.
What's the real goal?
Exactly. So what's the goal? Which does kind of get me to I didn't even really introduce the topic we were going to be talking about. Very bad podcast hosting by me. But we're looking at how advisors can potentially leverage social media in order to grow their business, grow their profile, to improve how they are bringing in clients. Obviously, for many advisors, they're probably sitting there thinking, I don't really need to do this to have clients. We're in a really great spot right now with advice where supply is pretty low and demand is fairly high.
Yes.
You can get clients, but why do you think that going down this social media route and being fairly heavy in it is a positive for your business in this kind of environment anyway?
Well, look, I think it's, different advisors, different businesses have different goals. I suppose to answer a slightly different question, the reason that I got into content marketing and content and ultimately social content was that when I started my business, I'd been an advisor for a while. I thought I knew what I was doing. I think maybe just a little bit at least. And so I'd had the advice side of things sorted, but I'd never sourced a client before, and I started my business from scratch. I didn't go buying a book or anything like that. And so obviously like getting new clients through the door was how my business was going to get off the ground and ultimately how it was going to grow. And so a lot of advisors, and there's a lot of different ways to be right in this stuff. I think that's the beauty of the profession. But a lot of advisors focus on traditional referral partners, accountants, mortgage brokers, those sorts of things. For me, and I built some great relationships with great partners in that space over the years, but I didn't really want the core of my business growth strategy to be around relying on someone else to send me over clients. And so that's when I started doing content and, I was doing a little bit of blogging and then just slowly just bolted on more things over time. And so for us at Pivot Wealth, we're on a mission to help. We want to help 10,000 Australian families and have an impact, a bigger impact. And so that means that we're able to grow the business, to see more people, to add on advisors, and to ensure that as we add on advisors that we're able to give them people to talk to that they can add some value to. So yeah, that's for us. And now content and social content is a core part of the strategy, and it's probably over 50% of our new client flows are coming in through that channel. And that's allowed us we're running at about a 50% growth rate for the last 6 or 7 years or something. So that's the flywheel. But look, if you're an advisor, you're busy in your business, you're getting good referrals from your clients, you've got a few trusted partners, and you don't have the capacity to take on more clients. Probably limited in terms of the new client flow value that you can get from doing that. I would argue though that there is still quite a bit of value for your existing clients and for your brand in the marketplace to be doing some of that content. But yeah, I probably wouldn't be doing as much if I didn't want to grow my business in the way that I do.
It does come down in a lot of ways to what you say there with what the goal for the business is. Not every advice firm wants to grow. Many are happy. We're at this level. This is how many clients we're handling. We're happy with this. We're profitable. We're fine. We're comfortable. This is okay. We're happy with this. We don't want to be pushing for growth. Many other firms are. As a little bit of an aside, you mentioned you've got the other advisors. You want to make sure they've got people that they're able to see. Do you ever get the kind of clients come in and it's because they've seen your videos and they've followed you on social media and stuff like that, and then they're seeing a different advisor at the firm and they're just a bit like, I wanted to see Ben?
Yeah, look, we do get the question gets asked, and I think it's completely natural that if you're the face of all of the content and that's driving people into your business when they come in, that's what attracted them. And so I think that they generally, would prefer if they're talking to the exact same person. But realistically, if you're in a growing business, it doesn't work like that. Like personally, I don't take on new clients. In fact, I don't actually have any of my own dedicated clients anymore. I'm working with all of our advisors. Some of them I work more closely with on some client groups, but every client in the business has a dedicated advisor that's not me. And we're pretty upfront in our process. I think for anyone that's looking to go into social media marketing or content marketing generally, you want to have a pretty robust, structured process for the funnel, basically, once someone comes in. And we're very upfront right at the start that, this is how we work together as a team. This is what Ben's involvement is. It's not to do prospecting calls. It's not to do advice delivery. I do say to our clients that I make myself available to any client at the business at any time if they want to have a conversation with me. And I get taken up on that. And sometimes I push myself into conversations if there's something, significant going on that I think is worth having a different voice in the conversation. But, we definitely get the odd client that says, I want to work with Ben, and the odd, maybe non-ideal client that says, I only want to work with Ben. And we just simply say, look, that's not how it works. And we appreciate where you're coming from, but unfortunately we can't facilitate it. And so if that means that you go somewhere else, then, we wish you all the best.
Yeah. Could end up being positive for them if it's gotten them interested and kind of motivated to get some level of financial advice, even if it doesn't end up being with Pivot, that's probably a positive.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully they've learned a couple of things on the way and a little bit more informed about their money. I think, particularly in the advice market today, as advice is getting more expensive, more people are getting pushed out of advice. And so I think content and quality content from quality advisors has a real role to play there in helping people understand with some of the simple things that they're just the principles, the frameworks that they can get started on their own. And they can then, build their financial momentum to the point where they may need an advisor. And maybe that's the person that's doing the content. Maybe it's a different business because of the nature of where that person is at financially. But either way, I think that's a win for the person. Sort of makes you feel a bit good about doing the content as well. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, and that explaining some of the concepts, but also and examples kind of popped in my mind of and it unfortunately it's not a video of yours, so sorry,
hold
but
it against you. Don't worry, mate.
You can take it up with Nicole Gardner, this is the video that it's reminded me of. So Nicole Gardner from Stellar Wealth, who's been a guest on the podcast, but I saw a video that she had done, I think on LinkedIn, and it wasn't explaining a financial concept necessarily. It was explaining a financial goal and the idea that she'd be better off if she sold her caravan. But the caravan isn't just the money that is locked up in the caravan and you could take it out, put it on your mortgage, you'd get debt-free faster. It's what that caravan allows you to do with your life and go on these holidays and enjoy it that way. And it's a different kind of tact for the financial social media side than like explaining investment concepts or explaining how you can optimize your tax. It's explaining the kind of the goals-based portion of advice.
100%.
Do you find that that's something that maybe more advisors should be kind of leaning into?
Well, look, I post on average 2 videos every day on social media. I've been doing that for 4 years. So that's like, 1,000 plus videos, couple of thousand plus over that time. And so, you can only talk about concessional super contributions so many times, you know what I mean? So, and I think that people, if you're trying to help people, and like you sort of touched on before, that you're trying to motivate people to take some action and to sort out their finances, whether it's with an advisor or doing it on their own, it's often the behavioral things, those things like what you're saying with Nicole's content there around goals and how to think about your money, how to shape up your money mindset, how to work on your money habits. Like these are the things that every advisor has their own perspective on, their own unique way of explaining, and that's why the people get traction on socials. Nicole's got her way, I've got my way. There's a lot of other great advisors doing their thing, and it's all a little bit different. Everyone's got different personalities, connect with different people, and so that's sort of the beauty of it as well. And I'm sure we'll talk about tips and those sorts of things.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Like knowing who you are and who you aren't, and being sort of delivering content that's true to that, I think is one of the biggest ways to really build a quality audience. It's not necessarily going to be a massive audience depending on what, who you are, who you serve, what you want to be doing. But that's where you get that actual engagement, which drives the change. And ultimately, my experience, and I think for a lot of other people as well, what leads then into the, getting more conversations with people that might need your help.
Yeah. We are going to take just a quick break. We will be back with more from Ben in just a moment. All right, we are back now with more from Ben Nash from Pivot Wealth, or from Instagram or TikTok or however you've come across his face before. A big part that we've kind of touched on is around what the reason you might be going this route. So for an advisor who is looking to grow, I think the ones that may be looking to stay at the level they're at, and the content could be beneficial from that education piece that you mentioned, and informing their clients, and doing a bit of help to the overall finfluencer space. We'll get to finfluencer stuff later, but for an advisor that's looking to grow their business, they may be looking to expand in a similar way to you with bringing on more advisors, stuff like that. Where do you think the best place to start is in figuring out how they should go about it, how they figure out what their online persona is, or translating their, like, who they are into an online space?
Well, look, there's probably a few things there, but I think one of the biggest ones is that you want to be really clear on your ideal customer, the person that you're making the content for, because if you're trying to be all things to all people, it's going to be really difficult. So, pick your best client, the one that you really enjoy working with, where you feel like you're adding a lot of value, where you've got a good relationship, where you they're happy to pay fees and work with you in a way that's commercial. And then into the, what are the problems, the challenges, the frustrations of those people. And you may be like us, we have a couple of different ones. We do a lot of work with tech professionals. That's one stream. We do a lot of work with SME business owners as well, like smaller companies. And they're our two main sort of like client avatars. And then for us, and we do this sort of semi-regularly, we're just going through what are the issues, what's bothering them, what keeps them up at night, what are the financial things that they want, what are the things that they may not be aware of that they should want to avoid, or whatever those things are. And you often find there's like, sometimes people ask me about content stuff and they're saying, how do you come up with the ideas? And it's like, there's so much stuff. And I think the real advantage that advisors have, that if you've been doing advice for any level of time, you've probably said the same thing like so many times. And that's why my videos, like when I started, it's just a snippet out of, the different meetings that you have and the way that you explain things. How do you explain, cash flow strategies to people, or, an investment, a risk profile, an index fund, how to get started investing, tax planning, like all of these things that, this is the stuff that people want to know, and this is the stuff that our clients are paying thousands of dollars for. You can wrap that up for free and give it to people, and they're going to get a huge amount of value out of it. It's obviously not going to be they're not going to be able to action it in the same way that they would if you're sitting there holding their hand and stepping them through the process, checking in, making sure they're comfortable, and doing the work for them as well. But that adds a huge amount of value, and that's the sort of content that gets real cut through as well. And I think further to that, like you just do it in the way that you do it, and not try to change anything too much. Explain it, fire up the camera and pretend like your client's sitting across from you. And often that times that's sort of the best content. One thing I'd say for anyone that's in that position and looking to grow and go down this path as well is that pick one thing that you're going to do. Maybe it's social videos, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a webinar, whatever the things are. But it's very, very difficult, particularly if you haven't done a lot of this stuff before, to do all of the things at once. And I know I definitely fell into this trap at the start that people are saying, oh, you got to do the picture posts, and you got to do the video stuff, and you got to have a podcast, and all of these different things, and it just gets overwhelming. You end up dabbling, and then you're not doing any of them well. But if you pick one thing and you go all in, and then you're consistent in that, and you need to be consistent for a reasonable amount of time, like 6 to 12 months, because you will get, particularly if you're going social media and social media content at the start, you're unlikely to get a lot of success quickly because it takes a long time to get the flywheel cranking. But if you just stay at it and stay consistent, that's where the results come from. Like I was on Instagram, and it took me, I would say, I don't know exactly, but I would say six years at least to get to 1,000 followers. It took me probably another couple of years or more to get to 2,000 followers. And then it went from 2,000 to 100,000 in like a 12-month period. And literally the content was not significantly different. Like I'd like to think in my mind that I'd get better over time, maybe a tiny bit, but not, like 50 times better to drive that growth. But it's literally just about staying there, keeping doing it, keeping focus on it, keep changing little things. And if you do that, you tend to build traction.
Right. Just like investing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's compound returns.
It's compound returns.
Exactly.
It's perfect. Yeah. There's probably some advisors that are sitting out there thinking, probably just can't do the social media thing. You're like, are there people that just simply, it's not going to work? You just, for whatever reason, you just don't mesh with social media, and it's just, you're just better off focusing on different channels? Or do you think it's open that anyone can do it?
Look, I think most people can do it, and I think anyone that's really, really prepared to give it a good crack can do it. And in fact, if you're, if you think that the reason that you can't do it is because you feel, a little bit camera shy, or you don't think that there's people that would connect with your style of explaining things, if you're a mad introvert like I am, you feel weird about all of that stuff. I would say that there's so many people out there, like all sorts of different people in the world, that people connect to people like them. And sometimes you can build the deepest connections in the smallest markets. And that's enough. Like for advisors, it's not like you need 100,000 clients. Like no one can deal with that amount of work. And so if you've got a small following that's engaged and connected with you, then generally that's going to be enough to drive some pretty significant business outcomes. And, if you get to that point, and then you can, if you want to, you can focus on it more. If you don't want to, you keep it where it is. So I would say it's possible. And it's also doesn't take a lot of time. Like there's a ton of websites out there. One for anyone that's getting started, Answer the Public. It's like a super, it's all free, and you basically can put in any topic that you want. Maybe it's tax, and it will just basically give you a list of like 40 of the most searched terms on the internet about tax. You can put it so it's only relevant, only shows search results in Australia as well.
Okay.
And honestly, like if you do that, you've automatically got like 300 ideas that you can do for your video. And so it's not about that. And then recording it, now I record my content in a studio because I do it so that I save my own time. But honestly, the content that I shoot on my phone gets more traction and more reach than the content that I do in the studio. I only do it in the studio because it makes it a lot easier for me, because then my videographer can, shoot it off to the team, and I don't really have to touch it, rather than mucking around on my phone and editing up the video and
just
doing
the talent,
all that sort of stuff.
Just the talent.
Yeah, exactly. So it can be quick, although be prepared that the first dozen that you do is probably going to take you a fair bit longer as well.
Always a bit harder the first time you're doing it. Once you get a rhythm going. But yeah, no, same idea. This is what I've got Patty over here for. Is because I'm just the talent, And I don't know how to do any of the digital stuff. One of the areas I wanted to talk to you about is finfluencers.
Yep.
Because definitionally, you are a finfluencer. Do you like getting that term applied to you, or do you feel it does have that stigma of people that are unqualified and don't really know what they're talking about?
Yeah, look, I think it's no, probably not really, but like finfluencer, influencer, generally, I think all of those ones that that you imagine, that archetype of people that are I suppose don't really do that much other than build followings, Kardashians and all of these people, very successful people, mind you.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it's a huge compliment, but it's sort of like almost a statement of fact when you do build a big following online. So it's not like I hate it either. I think that there's a lot of finfluencers out there in that space. I think it's great that everyone's aware of this stuff, and it just means that people are actually paying attention.
I guess the main thing is just ensuring that people are getting accurate information when they're listening to finfluencers.
Agreed.
Which I have to imagine you'd be scrolling through stuff and you'd come across videos and stop and listen and just be like, oh God, they should not be saying that.
Yeah.
Does that happen pretty frequently?
Look, I do. I quite enjoy Equity Mates. They do a roundup each week and talk about the worst finance videos on the internet. And
kind of like Instagram Media Watch.
Yeah, sort of, pretty much, yeah. And they get some absolute crackers on there. Tends to not pop up on my feed that much, although you do see the odd video which seems a little bit off. And look, I think it's definitely something that's quite important. I think people can get misled, and it's often sometimes the most damaging things are not where people are intentionally misleading, but it just may be incorrect or understated. But then you've got the flip side of the coin as well. And social media, people are a little bit crazy on there. That might surprise you, Keith.
I'm shocked to hear this. This is the first time I've been informed that people online are a bit unhinged.
But you put out content and I'll often get comments from people and they'll say, oh, you didn't explain, this really like niche part of like or a condition on the rule, and so it sort of can go both ways. It's sort of hard to please everybody, but obviously you want to make sure that your information is factually correct. And if you are following someone, and for anyone that's using someone to educate themselves, you want to make sure that person knows what they're talking about. That's important.
Probably worth remembering for people that are watching financial or any kind of informative video, you're not going to be able to explain everything about a topic in a 60-second, 90-second reel. You're going to have to draw some boundaries somewhere where you can't go, all right, so this is how non-concessional contributions work, and then explain all of the minutiae that you need a degree to understand. That it's just not realistic.
Exactly. And even if you could, no one would watch it because those videos are like too boring, right?
Yeah.
So it's a difficult balance to strike. Like as someone that's producing the content, I'm a really detailed person. I'd love to go into all of the detail, but when you do that, and there's a ton of videos where I've done that, but they just don't get traction because people are like, oh, it's 4 minutes long. I don't have 4 minutes, even though they doom scroll then for another 40 minutes,
Yeah, you've got an hour for 30 seconds at a time, but you don't have the 4 minutes for the kind of like when people are like, oh, I don't really want to put a movie on, but then they'll watch an entire season of television.
Exactly.
Because you've got that kind of illusion of a break point, you can just like override that bit in your brain telling you don't have time.
Exactly.
Have you gotten much in the way of pushback from other people within financial advice or kind of financial services more broadly around, not really liking advisors being on social media and putting the content out?
I think some people can be a little bit like sort of gatekeeper, a bit defensive and say, that there's a lot of sort of secret sauce in there that should be reserved for advice clients. But look, I think the information's all out there as well. I remember when I first started doing content, there was very little on things like debt recycling strategies, and we've seen that more and more from people. And I think it's awesome that that's gone into the public sphere. I don't think that takes anything away from the value that advisors can deliver, because it's something that's very difficult for people to do on their own as well. And so I haven't really come across too much of it from advisors, but look, I think ultimately having people that are more aware, this is why like Scott Pape and Barefoot Investor and, love him or hate him, I think he's great. And I think one of the best things that he's done for Australians is he's really put the conversation around personal finances into the public sphere. Like people understand that this is something that they should be thinking about. That's been enormously beneficial for every advice business and every advisor as well. And so, I suppose if you're anti, I feel like you should be sort of thanking the people that are out there, because it is making people more aware. And as you touched on before, like we're seeing higher levels of demand for advice than we have, and obviously we've got lower advisor numbers as well. And so that's keeping everyone pretty busy, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can be optimistic. We're going to have great rebound in advisor numbers. There'll be way more coming in, and then you'll need all the social media marketing so that you can all have enough clients, right?
Yeah.
We are going to take one more break, and we'll be back with a bit more from Ben in just a moment. All right, we are back again with a bit more from Ben Nash from Pivot Wealth. Last bit was around finfluencers, something that, if they're giving out incorrect information, it's not good. If an advisor is giving out incorrect information or stepping over a line of what they should be providing in a public sphere like this, it could lead to some issues. How do you, view compliance when you're doing social media content, and how do you stay within the bounds of what you kind of legally have to?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really important area, important for protecting consumers, important for protecting your business and yourself as an advisor as well. I think it's not always easy. What I do is I've got disclaimers on all of my profiles. That was something that was important to us, and we run our own license, our compliance team that supports that. Also, when I am talking about anything that's really clearly, like if I'm talking about a specific investment, for example, or like even a real clear asset class, I'll tend to actually add a verbal disclaimer into my post as well. Right. And then I put a written disclaimer onto a number of posts as well. Now, look, I think that there's a little bit of a common sense thing here as well, that if you're posting a video onto the internet, particularly on social media, then I honestly don't see a world where someone could say that that's personal advice.
Pretty hard to consider it personal advice when you've posted it to 100,000 people or something.
That's right, yeah. But that being said, I still just disclaim everything and make it really clear, not being definitive, sharing people's stories, my experience, what I found work, and just being really careful and deliberate with the language that I use, particularly around when you're explaining a concept or a strategy in some ways. It's sort of the same in that if you're doing a live event or like a webinar, we do a lot of webinar content as well, and people will ask a question, which is obviously a question often based on assumingly their circumstances, that you want to respond to that question, but do it in a general way where people understand that you're not telling them what to do. And then we just monitor and review and just make sure we get our compliance team checking in on content, making sure that there's nothing there. I had a conversation with the ATO. They sent me an email. I was actually away on holidays. Got this email from the ATO. Had a mild panic attack because it was from their media unit, and I immediately thought, "Oh my God, what have I done?
What have I done?"
Yeah, and I'm looking at my content, and they were actually really great. That this was as my profile started to get a bit more of a following, and they said, we can see that you're doing a lot of tax content. If you want to have a conversation with us, know that we're here to support. And I said, great, yeah, let's have a conversation. So I had to catch up with a couple of the team from their media unit, as well as one of the deputy commissioners. And I just asked them and said, how do you see me explaining things like this? And what do you think are the issues to make sure that, keeping everyone happy as well? But look, you're a journalist. I'm sure you see it a bit. Occasionally, people make mistakes. That happens. I definitely have in my content in the past. I had to make a couple of amendments to articles that have gone out and different bits and pieces. But I think if you're approaching it with the right intention, and certainly that you're not being deceptive or trying to mislead or have people misinterpret what you're saying, and you're being sensible with your disclaimers, then that goes a long way.
Yeah, if you're not trying to get them into one of those group chats where they sell, or get people on specific share trades and things like that, that's definitely going to get you in trouble. No one should be doing that.
100%. And it's like the spam and scam stuff is so extreme now. Like, I must have literally hundreds of clone profiles, and regularly we'll get messages from people, and like I don't know how it still happens, but I think it would be great if every Australian knew that a financial advisor is never going to tell you to message them on WhatsApp and send them money for a crypto investment or a share trading investment or anything like that. Like, people don't do that, but people still fall for it.
And if they are a licensed advisor and they're asking you to do that,
they're the wrong
you need
advisor.
to be reporting them to ASIC.
100%.
That needs to be reported, because no, you should not be doing that. I mean, especially something like crypto. There's it's a bit of a tough area for advisors to give legitimate advice on that area.
But young people don't realize that. They don't realize the significant distinction between cryptocurrencies and regulated markets necessarily. And it's unfortunate to hear that people do still get caught out by that. And I suppose that, again, just making sure that you on the top of most of my social profiles, there's a warning video about that, like prime real estate on those profiles, just so that people are aware of some of the considerations. And also in our content, we'll talk about the difference between general information that you can get and then personal advice that you can get from a proper financial plan as well.
Yeah. What do you think maybe in the realm of clients that come to you having seen you on Instagram, TikTok, whatever social media, and then kind of coming in to get advice, and they're kind of primed to respond in specific ways because they're so used to your content. Is that something that kind of pops up a bit?
Yeah, I think it's great. I love it when people come from our content, and particularly when they come from following the content for a long time, because you've already gotten across the key messages and philosophies in a lot of cases. And in those earlier conversations, you're asking clients what's important to them or what they want, and they'll often recite back some of the things that you've been banging on about how this is important, and leverage is good, and risk management is important, and index fund investing is good, and they tend to be already trained in your mold, and that makes it a lot easier for onboarding them, and often means that people can get more out of the advice process as well, because they're not hearing about all of these concepts for the first time.
Right.
So I think that's a really good thing, and I think for for consumers to connect with an advisor, I think it's important that they find someone that has a philosophy or a set of philosophies that they connect with, because reality is when it comes to money, there's a lot of different ways to be right. And I don't think it's for me or for any other advisor to say, well, this is right and this is wrong. Often it's just that, a certain thing will have some advantages and some trade-offs, and a different thing will have different advantages and different trade-offs. And ultimately you want to help your clients to understand that. But if you've already been talking about all of the things that you really believe in and why you think that the advantages and trade-offs of this are better than the advantages and trade-offs of something else, then they're often going to be already have that message sort of ingrained in them. So it's a lot smoother onboarding, less time, puts them in a position to take more action faster, which means they can get better results faster. Then they're happy clients. Then you got long-term clients. So I think it's great.
Do you find ever that they kind of are giving answers to questions around what their goals are, and you're just like, this feels like you've taken these directly from my content. Maybe we need to interrogate this a bit more deeply to get down to whether these are actually your goals or they're just what you think the goals should be?
Yeah. Look, I think that we always spend a fair bit of time talking about the why and what sits behind the goals as well. And so property is something that we've seen work really well for our clients. We're big believers in that when used the right way. We don't recommend direct properties or anything like that, but just, having quality blue chip properties, using leverage, and getting some tax efficiencies as well. And we often find that when clients come to us, what do you want to do, or what's success, and they'll mention something around property, but we're always making sure we're asking the follow-up question, why is that important to you? What is the purpose? And really understanding that, so that we can see if it's an investment thing, is it a lifestyle thing, is it a family-based decision, and ensuring that then we're tackling their advice in a way that aligns with what is actually important to them. So I think, and I'm sure a lot of other advisors are the same, that I think gone are the days, and I think in a really good way, where it's just like, trust the advisor, or you make the call. Like for us, we really constructed our whole advice process to ensure that our clients do really understand it. Obviously, we've got an obligation to do that as financial advisors as well, but really, understanding it at the core. And that has a lot of benefits in buy-in for the advice, ownership of the outcomes, two-way accountability from the plan as well.
Next one I want to get to. Tips for advisors that they can avoid making mistakes maybe you made early on in doing that kind of social content and trying to connect with people that way. Yeah. Any challenges that you kind of ran up against and hit that, advisors can listen to and then try and avoid that mistake themselves?
Look, I think time is a big one at the start, and particularly when I first started going down this path, I was doing the content and the lead generation, the marketing activities. I was doing all the sales conversations, and I was doing a lot of the delivery as well. And what would typically happen for me is that you go, oh, we don't have any leads. We've got no one to talk to. So I better go and do some marketing. And so you push away, do a bunch of stuff. And then the leads come through, and then you get busy in sales conversations, and you're doing all this prospecting type work, and you sort of drop the marketing piece because you're busy with the sales stuff. Then you get some sales, then you start doing the delivery, then you're really busy with the delivery, you're not doing the leads or the sales, and then you finish the delivery and go, oh, I've got no leads, and then you sort of do it all again. And so I did that for a number of years. And so what I found a real game changer for us, and partly it came about because we brought in team that could take over some of the activities to create a little bit more time. But shortly before we did that, I actually had some clear time blocks where every day I was doing the activities and had my time blocks there to ensure that I could be consistent across all of the different activity streams that I needed to be working on in the business. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest ones for anyone that's doing it. It's like, it's not going to feel comfortable at the start. It's probably not going to be that great. You're probably not going to get that much traction. But if you just have the time and you keep going and I can make this a little bit better by changing this thing, or focus on this other piece of content, you'll find that you will build that momentum. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. And what I touched on before, trying to do too many things at the same time. Pick one thing, nail it. When you feel that you've nailed it, and build a system around it so that you can do it consistently, then you can add on something else. But if you try to do it all at once, you won't do any of them very well at all.
Yeah, figure it out before you expand a bit.
Exactly.
All right, I've got one last question for you. It's not to do with the social media content or anything along those lines. I like to get an idea at the end of podcasts what you think the most important, interesting, challenging, wherever you want to take it, but the most interesting and important topic within financial advice is right now.
Ooh.
I know. I like to kind of spring it as well.
Yeah.
Not give you time to prepare.
Sprung it on me. Look, I think, how are we going to replace this exodus of advisors and bring up talent? It's,
right.
We've got a number of PY candidates in our business, and it does take quite a long time attracting more people into the industry as well. I think it's a real challenge, and I think it's something that we need to address. So yeah, I'd say that's probably a big one. AI is probably another one, actually, thinking as I'm talking as well. I think
probably help with that time management stuff you were talking about too.
Certainly does. But I think that how we'll evolve advice models to fit in with AI and where the technology is going, because it's not going anywhere. And I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there, but I do think it needs to be really carefully, managed and integrated into advice businesses. And I think if we're not sort of adapting to it and leveraging the tools that are there and using them to enhance what we're doing, I think there is a risk that we get left behind or get taken over by technology. And obviously, as someone that is really passionate about advice, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners are as well, that we know that we can have a real impact on people, and probably more than what the computer machines can do, at least for today. So I think that there's a challenge there that we all need to address.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining the show today, Ben. It was great to have you on.
Right, good to be here.
Awesome. And thank you again as well to everyone who is listening along. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing what Ben had to say, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.